It's time to finish off fall once and for all with my quarterly big top 10 video. With these lists, I throw the budget restrictions to the side and we talk about books that are often on the cusp of possibility for many collectors. These can be books that are creeping up in value and may slip beyond reach in the near future, or we may cover books that were previously unaffordable and have now slid back within reach of collectors who missed their opportunity to pick them up as they were on the rise. We've got a little bit of everything in this one. Golden Age, lots of Silver Age, Bronze Age, and even a little bit of modern age comic book goodness for comic collectors of all interests. So let's dive into the books and close out the fall of 2023 Top 10 Comic Series once and for all. Starting off our list is a Silver Age DC key whose previous sky-high prices have come back to earth. Green Lantern number 7. Cover dated for July and August 1961, Green Lantern 7 features the first appearance of the best Green Lantern villain to date, Sinestro. Plagued by the oh-so-common failure of so many Silver Age keys, Sinestro debuts in this issue, but he's not depicted on the Gil Kane cover. As we've discussed in the past, this can oftentimes hold the value of such books down, while their eventual first cover appearance will get a bump compared to a regular second appearance oftentimes. The story that brought us our soon-to-be lemon-colored foe was titled The Day 100,000 People Vanished, and it was written by John Broome and drawn by Gil Kane. Sinestro was revealed to be a Green Lantern who abused his authority, which led to his expulsion from the Lantern Corps. It wasn't until his subsequent appearance in Green Lantern 9 where Sinestro would wield his yellow power ring for the first time. Current values are down for most grades, but a few of the most recent sales have shown slight improvements in comparison with the most recent 12-month average. There is also a lot of price compression with Green Lantern 7 at the moment, as only $187 separate the 90-day average prices of 1.5 and 5.0 copies. With the most recent CGC 1.5 sale taking place in September 2023 at $279, and the 90-day average price of a CGC 5.0 coming in at $466, with the most recent sale this month, December 2023, for $432. Above the 5.0 grade, the values increase sharply, and you're quickly flirting with a 4-figure price point by the time you hit a 6.0. Next up is another major Silver Age first appearance, but unlike Sinestro, the character debuting here starred in multiple movies and was a major part of the golden age of the MCU. Our number 9 book is Tales of Suspense number 52, the first appearance of the Black Widow. Cover dated April 1964, Tales of Suspense 52 sees the Black Widow premiere as a new Iron Man villain, appearing alongside the previously introduced Crimson Dynamo. Being that this is a Marvel book from the 1960s, you've probably got a pretty good guess as to who the creative team was. The cover artist for this issue was Jack Kirby and the writer was Stan Lee, but Kirby didn't do the interiors on this one. The interior artist was actually Don Heck. Black Widow's run as a villain would be fairly short-lived, and in time she would actually become a member of the Avengers. Black Widow was prominently featured in the Infinity Saga, making her debut in Iron Man 2, then becoming a founding member of the MCU's version of the Avengers, until making the ultimate sacrifice in Endgame. The character would then get her own film before fading out of the spotlight. And while that may be a bummer for fans of the MCU, her absence, along with the price correction the market's currently experiencing, has brought TOS 52 back within reach of some collectors. In the 5.0 grade, we've had 4 sales in the last 90 days, averaging out at $709 for a book that sold for just below $1,300 on average back in 2021. That's a drop of roughly 45%. $700 is still a pretty good chunk of change, so let's also look at the 3.0 grade, which has seen 6 sales in the most recent 90 days. The last sale in 3.0 was for just $315, which is well under the 90-day average sales price of $373 in grade. Back in 2021, CGC 3.0 copies sold for an average price of $761, meaning that the current 90-day price of $373 is half of what that book was selling for just 2 years ago. TOS 52 is as cheap as it's been since January of 2019, outside of a rather quick drop in the beginning of 2020, where a single copy went for pretty cheap just on the eve of the comic book boom. 2003 was quite the year for an up-and-coming comic book writer named Robert Kirkman. Before the year wrapped up, he would launch his second creator-owned series of the year, a little tale called The Walking Dead. You may have heard of it. But it's the debut issue of his first series of 2003, Invincible, that you'll find in the number 8 spot. Published in January 2003, Invincible 1 is full of first appearances, as you might expect a first issue to be. Premiering in the issue were Invincible, Omni-Man, Titan, and several other supporting characters. The issue was written by the aforementioned Robert Kirkman, while the cover and interior art duties fell on artist Corey Walker. The print run for Invincible 1 was fairly small, with just 10,800 copies ordered by retailers. For comparison, The Walking Dead number 1's print run was just under 7,300. Invincible was adapted into an animated series for Amazon recently, and it's been renewed for a third season. The book remains pretty pricey in a 9.8, and it's held its value rather well over the last couple years, particularly for a modern key, as the current 90-day average sales price of $3,350 is just $59 below the average 2021 sales price of $3,409. In a market where major keys have been crushed by 25 to 50%, a $59 dip is pretty damn good. If you're not interested in having a really high-end copy of the book and just want to check this one off your list, there appears to be a bit of an opportunity for this one in the VF range, specifically in CGC 8.5. 8.5s had an average sales price of $1,125 back in 2021, but they're currently sitting at a 12-month average of $610, with a single sale in the last 90 days in November 2023 of $575. When you move up to a 9.0, you may be able to snag a deal for just under $1,000, but anything above a 9.0 will certainly set you back 4 figures. The number 7 book packs a mean sting with the first appearance of Mac Gargan as the Scorpion in Amazing Spider-Man number 20. ASM 20 was published in January 1965 and comes from the midpoint of Steve Ditko's run on Spider-Man. The book was really hitting its stride by the time this issue was released. In less than 2 years from the release of Amazing Spider-Man 1, the title's creative pairing of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko had already created some of the most enduring villains and supporting characters in the Marvel Universe. In case you're not up on your Spider-Man history, by issue 20, the following members of the Webhead's Rogue Gallery had debuted: Chameleon, Vulture, Doc Ock, Sandman, the Lizard, Electro, the Enforcers, Mysterio, Green Goblin, Kraven the Hunter, and our featured baddie, the Scorpion. Mac Gargan had a brief appearance in the preceding issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but it wasn't until this issue where he underwent the procedure to become the Scorpion. The speculators went hard after ASM 20 when Mac Gargan made an appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming, but after 2 sequels and a whole lot of creative uncertainty at the House of Mouse lately, along with a pretty strong correction in the market, there's been a significant impact on the value of this issue. CGC 4.5s have seen the highest volume of sales in the most recent 90 days, with a total of 8 sales. Those sales have an average price of $541, which is a 27% drop from the 2021 average sales price of $744 in grade. Looking at CGC 6.0 copies, they've seen a drop of 39% when you compare the current 90-day average sales price to the 2021 average price. 2 years ago, a CGC 6.0 would have cost you $1,337. Whereas today, they're averaging just $815. If your budget is tighter, a CGC 2.0 to a 4.0 copy can be had for between $300 and $400 based on recent sales, with a fair amount of price compression present between the good and very good grade ranges. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of EC comics, and of all the classic EC titles, there's one that is often overshadowed by some of its more well-known sister titles. So for the number 6 spot, let's peek behind the curtain of 1950s sci-fi comics with Weird Fantasy number 13. Everybody knows Tales from the Crypt and Weird Science. Movies and TV shows, they do that. Other new trend titles like Vault of Horror, Crime Suspense Stories, and Haunt of Fear are well known for their classic covers or stories. But Weird Fantasy, it doesn't get much love. Weird Fantasy 13 is the first issue of the series, even though it starts at number 13, which was a pretty common thing for the new trend. Back in the day, when you restarted the numbering for a book, you were subject to updated fees, so EC tried to avoid that wherever they could by just retitling existing books. Weird Fantasy actually took over the series A Moon, a Girl, Romance. If you're wondering what that looked like, we went from troubled lovers sitting on a park bench in the moonlight on the cover of issue 12 to a scientist talking to a brain in a jar while another guy is behind him building his mechanical body in the background. You know, that's a pretty hard left turn if you ask me. But an interesting fact about these old EC books is that back in the day, the sci-fi issues were way more desirable than the horror books, and the values reflected that. Nowadays, that's flipped. The horror issues are much more sought after than the sci-fi books. So to translate, if you're interested in getting into collecting original EC comics, weird science and weird fantasy could be a good entry point for you. As it goes with Golden Age books, we don't have a ton of comps to look at when it comes to Weird Fantasy 13, but let's take a look at what we do have. The most recent reporting sales for a CGC 6.0 copy that sold in October 2023 for $1,133. I'm sure you're thinking, dude, it's $1,100. And you're right, it's not cheap by any means. But for comparison, a CGC 6.0 copy of Weird Science 12, the first issue of that series, sold in March 2023 for $1,750. And there hasn't been a copy of that that's sold for less than $1,000 in any grade in the most recent 12 months. The availability of Weird Fantasy 13 does seem to have dried up a bit at the present moment. Copies have generally been readily available in the past, but they're kind of slim as of the recording of this video. This has led to some unusual sales results in 2023, as a CGC 4.0 sold for $815 in July, which was followed by a sale of a CGC 5.0 in August for $815. On the lower end, a CGC 1.8 sold for just $275 back in January 2023, which seems like a fairly good deal for the buyer. The number 5 book is a Bronze Age classic, a book that I've called the most beautiful of the Bronze Age, and it features a first appearance that absolutely every X-Men fan wants in their collection. The book is X-Men 101, the first appearance of Jean Grey as the Phoenix. Published in October 1976, X-Men 101 picks up where the cliffhanger ending of X-Men 100 left off, with Jean sacrificing herself to save the team from a cosmic flare, which would be the beginning of one of the greatest story arcs in all of comics history, the Phoenix Saga. Just the 9th X-Men issue in Chris Claremont's long run as the writer on the title, this issue features Dave Cockrum art for the cover and interior art. Now, despite Fox's inability to adapt the story successfully since the X-Men cartoon of the early 1990s, the story has proven strong enough to withstand multiple less than good big screen re-envisionings. While this issue may not have the value of other Bronze Age keys like Incredible Hulk 181, in my experience, it's one of the most liquid keys of all the X-Men comics. If you put one of these things out for sale, chances are you're gonna sell it. Speaking of sales, CGC 7.5 copies have had the highest number of sales in the last 90 days, with 15 sales reporting on GPA. The average sales price is currently sitting at $427, while the most recent sale earlier this month was for right at $500. The 2021 average for a 7.5 was $686, meaning that the current value in grade has experienced a drop in price of approximately 38%. There have been 13 sales of CGC 8.0 copies over the same period, with an average sales price of $502. If your budget's $300 or less, then you should still be able to bring home up to a CGC 5.5 copy for your PC, as price compression comes back for a visit, with copies in grades 2.5 to 5.5 selling for between $200 and $300 in the current market. Up next in the number 4 spot is one of my absolute favorite Silver Age DC issues, Superboy number 68. Cover dated October 1958, Superboy 68 is the first appearance of the Superman villain, Bizarro. Though, as we do in the hobby, there's some level of disagreement about this. Technically, the Bizarro issue that debuts in this issue, and is the first ever Bizarro character, is Bizarro Superboy. With Bizarro number 1, the Bizarro version of Superman, first appearing in Action Comics 254 the following summer in July 1959. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Superboy 68 is the true first appearance of Bizarro, and if you look at the value of the books, the market agrees, as the value of Superboy 68 trumps the value of Action 254 by a considerable amount. Superboy 68 sports a Curt Swan cover, and the cover story, which was titled The Boy of Steel vs. the Thing of Steel, Chapter 1, The Amazing Bizarro, was written by Otto Binder and drawn by George Papp. Prices for Superboy 68 have held up rather well over the last couple years, with most grades still at or around their 2021 average values today. This one is fairly attainable in lower grade, with a pair of sales of CGC 2.5 copies averaging out at just $281 in the most recent 90 days. There are a few sales in random grades in the same period, but the only other grade that has had multiple sales is CGC 7.0s, where 2 sales have averaged out at $3,283. Based on the most recent reporting sales, a $500 budget can land you up to a CGC 3.5 copy, but as is typical with mid to late 1950s DC books, high-grade copies are few and far between, which translates into a steep increase in value for mid-grade and higher copies. Fighting its way into the number 3 spot is a classic Marvel hero versus hero battle from the early days of the Silver Age. The story was cleverly titled The Hulk vs. the Thing, and it was found inside of Fantastic Four number 25. Published in April 1964, FF25 was a Jack Kirby and Stan Lee production, and it built upon an earlier story from Fantastic Four 12, where the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing and the Green Goliath squared off for the very first time. In Fantastic Four 25, it was a no-holds-barred, knockout-dragout. And better yet, the cover for FF25 is one of the best there is when it comes to a little domestic squabble between a couple of Marvel's powerhouses. Beyond the great battle story, this issue has hidden significance, as it also includes the second appearance of Captain America in the Silver Age, following his unthawing in Avengers number 4. As we've discussed in the past on the channel, if the first appearance, or in this case the first appearance in the Silver Age, has priced you out, check out the character's second appearance as a more affordable alternative. Values for FF25 are a bit of a mixed bag right now. Some grades are trending up based on a few stronger sales, others are moving lower, as is the general trend in the market. CGC 7.5 copies have seen the most action in the most recent 90 days, with a total of 5 sales and an average sales price of $768. This is a 20% drop in value over the book's 2021 average sales price of $962, but there's some wonkiness that happened in October 2023 when a CGC 7.0 sold for $1,265, severely jacking up the 90-day sales price in that grade, where another 7.0 had sold at the end of September for just $650. Dropping down to the CGC 3.0, we've had 4 sales in the most recent 90 days, with prices ranging from $175 to $245, or a $219 average. While the 3.0 is pretty affordable, the best opportunity appears to be in 6.5, where the 90-day average sales price is just $403 compared to the 2021 average sales price of $720, which is a drop of 44%, and $554 less than the 7.0, which is just a half a grade higher. Confounding its way into the runner-up spot is a book whose featured character is almost as enigmatic as the pink background color they chose for the book's cover. Our number 2 book is Batman 171. The mid-1960s were good times for Bat fans. Beginning in May 1963 with Batman 155, many of Batman's classic Golden Age villains that had been put on ice for a few years began being reintroduced into the comics. That was the Penguin, hence the ice joke. Then, in January 1966, the Batman TV show debuted. The show would run for 3 seasons before wrapping up in the spring of 1968, and while plenty of liberties were taken for the episodes, many were inspired by the comics. In fact, the show's very first episodes pulled from Batman 171, which featured the return of the Riddler, a villain we now consider to be a major member of the Bat's Rogues Gallery. Unfortunately, at the time, he hadn't been seen in the comics since December 1948's Detective Comics 142. Batman 171 was released in May 1965, so for 16 and a half years, the Riddler was MIA. And believe it or not, this was just the character's third appearance behind Detective Comics 140 and the previously mentioned TAC 142. Carmine Infantino provided the unusually colorful cover art, while Gardner Fox wrote and Sheldon Moldoff drew the issue's main story that was titled Remarkable Ruse of the Riddler. Looking at recent sales, values are generally coming down from their highs set during the boom. We've got 3 sales reporting in the most recent 90 days for 4 different grades, and that gives us some insight into where the market currently stands for Bat 171. On the high end, CGC 7.0 copies averaging just below $1,000, coming in at $994, with the most recent sale this month at just $847. Looking at the 2021 average sales price of $1,523, the 7.0 is down 44% in the current market. On the low end, we have 3 sales in 3.0, averaging out at $311, 3 sales in 4.0, averaging out at $438, and just above that, we have 3 sales in 4.5, where the average sales price is just $507. The 4.0 and 4.5 grades are seeing a 22 and 23% drop compared to their 2021 average sales prices respectively, while the CGC 3.0 is down 35% from its 2021 average sales price. Clawing its way to the top of the fall 2023 Top 10 Comics list is another one of the Bronze Age's most desirable first appearances. Our number 1 book is Iron Fist 14, the first appearance of Sabretooth. Cover dated for August 1977, this issue would have hit the stands right as the world was being overtaken by a little film called Star Wars. Iron Fist had some fantastic creators on its short run, and issue 14 was no exception. Chris Claremont wrote the story, and John Byrne drew the interior art. The two would partner up for one of the best creative collaborations in comics 4 months later when Byrne took over the art duties on X-Men from Dave Cockrum. And speaking of Cockrum, he actually designed Iron Fist 14's cover, but underappreciated 70s and 80s artist extraordinaire Al Milgrom penciled and inked the published cover art. With leaks coming out of the upcoming Deadpool 3 set, it's clear that we're not only going to get some Sabretooth action, but we may even get multiple versions of Sabretooth in the movie. That said, MCU hype is the last reason I would recommend this book to anyone at the current moment or in general. Much like X-Men 101 that we talked about earlier, Iron Fist 14 has been one of the most liquid Bronze Age books in my experience. And I suspect a lot of that comes down to people like me who grew up on the Fox X-Men cartoon where characters like Phoenix, Juggernaut, Apocalypse, and Sabretooth were well adapted and treated with the proper care by the team behind the Fox animated series. Which, of course, is more than we can say about Fox's handling of the IP on the live action side post-2002. Looking at values, the grade with the highest number of sales in the last 3 months is the 7.0 with a total of 12 sales reporting on GPA. Those 12 sales range between $216 and $405, which are also the low and high sales for all of 2023 in grade, and they average out to a 90-day sales price of $328. This is a 35% drop over the 2021 average sales price in grade. Our next highest volume of sales takes us up to the 9.2 grade, where 11 copies are sold in the last 90 days. With sales ranging from $511 all the way up to $940, 9.2s are currently averaging out at $662 across those 11 sales. The 2021 average sales price was $976, which comes in at a 32% drop in price with the current 90-day average sales price. With a $500 budget, you should be able to bring home up to a CGC 9.0 copy of Iron Fist 14, but even with a budget down around $300, a CGC 6.0 copy is still within your reach. And that's a wrap. Winter will officially be here in just a few days, and then we'll begin the Winter 2024 Top 10 series with the Top 10 comics on a $100 budget video in the coming weeks. 2023 has been an interesting year. We've hit some major milestones here on the channel in 2023, and I really appreciate all of the support you've given this year and in years past. 2024 is definitely going to be another wild year for the comic book market. With an election on the horizon, continued uncertainty in financial markets, and geopolitical turmoil, The crystal ball's looking a little fuzzy at the moment, but I'm happy to see values coming back in line with long-term price trends. As much fun as it was riding the bubble up, it's been fascinating to watch the market reset, and honestly, I can't wait to see where we go from here. Collect responsibly, and I'll see you in the next video.